Welcome to this our first night Satsang virtual edition on the occasion of the dehant of my father Pundit Deonarine Maharaj, and tonight we welcome Pundit Shivanan Maharaj to start us off on our first Satsang. Sitaram Panditji.
Sitaram, everyone. You guys can hear me well, right? Okay. I'd like all to please clasp your hands, close your eyes and bow your heads. Let's assume the position of a prayerful mood. Envision the form of Bhagavan in your minds, whatever form of Bhagavan you are familiar with. That one who you go to whenever anything goes wrong, whenever you contemplate on that higher power. That same Prabhu, that same Bhagavan, who you feel comfortable within. Envision that Bhagavan and meditate upon. Om Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakoti Samaprabha Nirvighanam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvara Adipurnam Ganadaksham Umaputram Vinayaka Mangalam Paramam Rupam Shri Ganesham Namamyaham Vakratunda Mahakaya Suryakote Samaprabha Nirvighanam Kurume Deva Sarvakaryeshu Sarvara Om Saraswati Namastubhyam Varde Kamarupini Vidyarambham Karishyami Siddhar Bhavatu Me Sara Akhanda Mandala Kaidam Vyaptamena Characharam Tatparam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Kurave Namaha Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Kurave Namaha Om Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Bhakti Rupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Om Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Buddhirupena Sanstita Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Namastasya namo namaha. Namastasya namo namaha. Hari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Vrindavan Bihari Lal ki. Sit down, everyone. So today the Katha Satsang will be taken from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the reason why we go to the Bhagavad Gita, especially in times like this, is because a lot of us would see ourselves in the characters in the Bhagavad Gita. We wouldn't see ourselves as Bhagavan Shri Krishna, but we would see ourselves as Arjuna. How? Why? Now, a little backstory about Arjuna. Two characters, well, there are more than one characters you would hear about in the Bhagavad Gita, but primarily it is a conversation between two characters. Bhagavan Sri Krishna, who is regarded as Lord Almighty, and Arjuna, who represents ourselves in this scenario. So, Arjuna belongs to the Pandava, who are regarded as dharmic or righteous and good people. And they are on the brink of war with the Kauravas, who are regarded as the adharmic, the unrighteous people. So, the Pandavas went through a lot of turmoil, and so many problems were inflicted upon them by their own cousins who were the Kauravas. And now they are both on a battlefield which is called Kurukshetra, and they are facing each other. And now Arjuna, along with Bhagavan Sri Krishna, rides out to the middle of the battlefield. And Arjuna and Sri Krishna is watching. Remember, they are his cousins, so he is watching his guru, his uncles, his cousins, people he grew up with, people who taught him, many of them. And now Arjuna is now faced with what we call a mental battle in his mind. He's faced with this mental battle in his mind. And the entire first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is there just basically complaining to Lord Krishna, "Oh Bhagavan, these are my cousins, these are my family. How could I step out into this field and battle my own family?" You could imagine that? Uncle, you could imagine going and fighting your brother and sister and cousin, like hand to hand, coughing, shooting them with all kind of things. You could imagine that? Yeah. A lot of ways going to fight for land and property. So yes, we could imagine that, because it was the same thing that was happening. They were fighting for land and property and ownership. And you see it every day. So you're seeing how you're seeing ourselves in that. Because the same scenario that happened so many thousands of years ago, it's happening right here, right now, and today. And that is why we see ourselves in this. So any righteous person, any person with a moral compass, who doesn't like to see others hurt, who has a form of compassion in them, if they are going to fight the persons that they grew up with, it is normal and it is obvious that some kind of feeling, some kind of dilemma would just occur in their mind. Why? Because they don't want to hurt their cousin, you don't want to hurt your uncle, who you regarded as your own guru, and you treat your guru as if he's God. Now you have to fight them. Now imagine that. And for the entire first chapter, Arjuna is just talking, "Oh Bhagavan Shri Krishna, I can't fight my uncle, I can't fight." He threw his Gandhava on the floor, his bow. It's the first time Arjuna ever pelt away his own bow, which he held with such a high esteem. And he dropped it on the floor. Why? Because Just like how we allow our emotions to overcome us, and our emotions, our anger, our fear, all these things cloud our intellect and we are unable to think clearly. In this same way, now Arjuna is feeling this. And before we go into it, at the beginning of any Bhagavad Gita chanting, there is a select few verses which are chanted, which gives praises to Bhagavan Shri Krishna and all the Devas and Devis. Called the Gita Dhyanam. So I ask you once more to join with us in a prayerful position as we chant this Gita Dhyanam. Om Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Grathitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritavarshiniim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvāmanusandadhāmi Bhagavad Gite Bhavatveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullarvindayata Patranetra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Puranaha Prajvalito Jnanamayah Pradipaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikaparnaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Gitamritaduhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogdha Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsasudhir Bhokta Dugdham Gitamritam Mahata Vasudevasutan Devam Kansachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum Bhishma Drona Tatajayatra Jala Gandharani Lotpala Shalyagrahavati Kripena Vahani Karnena Vela Kula Ashvathama Vikarna Ghora Makara Duryodhana Varitini Sotirna Khalu Pandavairanadi Kaivartakah Keshavaha Parasharya Vachasaroja Mamalam Gitartha Gandhotkatam Nana Kyanaka Kesharam Harikatha Sambodhana Bodhitam Loke Sajjana Shatpareiraharaha Pepiyamanam Muda Bhoyad Bharata Pankajam Kalimalam Pradvam Sina Shreyase Mukang Karoti Vachalam Pangulang Ghayate Girim Yat Krapatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudra Marutaha Stanvanti Divyaistavaihi Vedai Sanga Padakramopanishadaihi Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyantam Navirusura Suragana Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha Harihi Om Vrindavan Bihari Lal Ki Jai. So Arjuna is now watching his cousins, his uncles, his gurus, all these people he grew up with. And he's in the middle of the battlefield with Shri Krishna. And just like any good psychiatrist, any good counselor would, what Shri Krishna does, he just sits and he listens to all the complaints of Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Because you cannot know what a person really is going through and understand them unless you first listen to what they are saying. Is that not true? If you keep trying to interject and interject and interject, then you wouldn't really grasp or understand what they are saying. So Shri Krishna teaches us the first thing in problem solving and the first thing in dealing with any kind of situation. Listen first to understand the situation. And now, in chapter 2, is when Shri Krishna begins to speak. And Shri Krishna begins to speak and asks Arjuna, why are you grieving already? No one has died yet. But you are already grieving. You are already complaining. You remember plenty times we would just sit and procrastinate. All kind of thing going. You think about all kind of things that are going to happen that hasn't even happened yet. Is this not true? And the guys, you do this? Oh, Sean, you just do this? We all do this. Why? Because we like to get caught up in scenarios. Things that possibly could happen without focusing on what we should do. Right then and now. And this is procrastination. Over and over and over again. So now Sri Krishna, he said some harsh words to Arjuna in the beginning of chapter 2. And he snaps him out of his delusion. Because he tells Arjuna that yes, it is okay to have compassion. But the compassion you have is misplaced compassion. Why is it misplaced compassion? For example, if you see a man spend out all his money on drugs, he's working for real money, $10,000 a month, and he's spending all his money on drugs, you go and feel sorry for that man? A lot of us do feel sorry for that man. Why? Because we're like, wait, and then you give him a little $5 to fuel his habit. Is this not true? People do this. We do this all the time. Because it is misplaced compassion. You are feeling sorry for someone you should not feel sorry for. Because everyone on the other side of the field of Kurukshetra, they are fighting against Dharma. Is this not true? They are fighting against Dharma. Because in the beginning, Yudhishthira asked those who want to come and join him. They know Yudhishthira was an honest person. They knew how dharmic the Pandavas, what they stood for, the righteousness. And still, they opposed them. All of them. Why? Out of a false sense of loyalty. And then Arjuna there is showing this false sense of misplaced, this false sense of compassion, this misplaced compassion. So Shri Krishna, like any good psychiatrist, is trying to show him why this is misplaced compassion. So he begins, what is Arjuna grieving for? Abhay, why do you think Arjuna is grieving? What do you think is going to happen in this war? He's going to do what? Yeah, he's going to kill a bunch of them. Exactly. They are going to die. People from the Pandavas side are going to die. People on the Kauravas side are going to die. That is simply a subset of war. If you're going to war, people are going to die. Is this not true? It's like if I push this table not going to move forward? No, it's going to move forward. Every cause has a reaction. It's prarabdhan purushartha. Is that not true? Always. Cause and effect. All the time. But even though you know that all this is going to happen, you know that you are going to see all this bloodshed, what do you think is the right thing to do? Now, this pulls at our moral compass. This is why the Mahabharata is regarded as such a great book of Dharma. It is even regarded as one of is even called a fifth Veda because of the content that it contains. These people fighting for Dharma and Adharma. But how can we decide what is really Dharma and Adharma when we are faced with such thought-provoking situations like Arjuna is faced? It really makes us think, what should he really do? But Shri Krishna here is showing. And he tells him, in 5 verses before we go to start, he tells him, Arjuna, you are grieving for something that hasn't happened yet. But also, you are grieving for something which cannot die. He goes on to explain that the consciousness, the Atma, the self within each and every one of us, it cannot be cut. it cannot be hurt, it cannot be wet. None of these things can happen to our consciousness because we keep reborn and we reborn through an endless cycle of birth and death and birth and death. And as Shri Krishna continues explaining this to Arjuna, as Arjuna begins to listen as you would with full shraddha to a guru, here is where we will begin tonight's satsang. So like all, before we start, a small simple bhajan to the guru who taught us all that we know, the guru who wrote all these texts. Right? So like all, to just join with us, one verse of the bhajan. Right? Hari Om Aao Darshan Dejo Aao Guru Deva Darshan Dejo तुम हो जगत के धाता तुम हो जगत के धाता तुम ही हो ब्रह्मा तुम ही हो विष्णु तुम ही हो ब्रह्मा तुम ही हो विष्णु तुम ही हो शंकर रूपा आओ गुरुदेव दर्शन दीजो आओ गुरुदेव दर्शन दीजो तुम हो जगत की धाता तुम हो जगत की धाता तुम हो जगत की धाता तुम हो जगत की धाता. So I'm sure many of you have heard about this description of the self before, of the Atma, that which enlivens us, that which brings that consciousness to our very being. Yes, this body can be hurt, this body is ephemeral, it comes and goes, but this Atma remains. And Bhagavan Shri Krishna here is telling Arjuna, why are you grieving for something that is eternal? Why you are grieving for something that Sanatana, Anadi, eternal, beginless, also endless? When you kill them here, you are not touching their very essence, you are not touching their very soul. You are simply creating that avenue for them to go on to a next body. They came from something, they would go to something. It is inevitable. Anything that was created must be destroyed at some point in time. That is the nature, the ephemeral nature of things in this world. So, here we would begin our Bhagavad Gita chanting. These are the words of Bhagavan Shri Krishna. So like once the Bhagavad Gita is being chanted, you assume a prayerful position and listen to the words directly from Bhagavan Shri Krishna himself. Avyakto yamachintyam ma avakaryo yamuchyate tasmadevam virityevam nanushochitumarhasi. Right? We'll take them one verse at a time. So here, Bhagavan Sri Krishna is saying, this self, remember I was speaking about this Atma, right? I was telling you about all the things that cannot happen to it. Why? Because it is intangible. Just like, can you hold love? Can you hold love in your hand? It's an abstract concept, is it not? It's something we use to define that which we cannot define in any other way. The same way we define this consciousness, this thing that lives in us, Atma. It's abstract in that same way. It is simply the manifestation of a thought which rishis and munis contemplated upon, which it can be only that which enlivens us. That is that Atma. And Bhagavan Sri Krishna here is saying that this Atma, this self, is said to be unmanifest, is said to be that which cannot be thought about, is unthinkable also, and it doesn't change at all. Therefore, knowing this, Knowing this, Bhagavan Shri Krishna says to Arjuna, knowing all this about the Atma, you should not grieve. Yes or no? Anybody confused here? Why should you not grieve? Can anyone tell me why you should not grieve? Why do we grieve in the first place? Do we grieve for the soul? Do we grieve for the body? Do we grieve for the person? And the Gayatri, why do you grieve? Because of attachment. Why? Because we will miss them. We're not grieving for them. We're grieving for ourselves. Is this not true? We would miss them. In that same way, Arjuna is not grieving for them. He's grieving for himself. He has to do that task. If I remember correctly, Arjuna wanted to go into a forest and become a sannyasi. He's a kshatriya. His duty is to the battlefield, to fight this war, to protect dharma. But what he wants to do? He wants to go and he wants to Om Namah Shivaya. Right through. Whole time. And a lot of times we do this. Mamu, you ever just see something and say, it's something you have to do, and watch it and say, me I want to do that now, and then go and do something else? We always do this. It's something you have to do. But we just watch it. Like, for example, I have work due tonight, and I'll watch it and I'll be like, and then I'll play, do all kind of other things. Not really play, but do other things, occupy myself with things I want to do, productive things. But the thing I want to do tonight, I leave it for very last minute. Why? Who knows? Procrastination, my own mind playing with me, all these things. We all think like this. Arjuna thinks like this. So what can we do? We have to train that mind. We have to develop that willpower. And the same way, Arjuna and Shri Krishna are friends. Just in the same way that I would tell Harshan all kind of thing, and Harshan would tell me all kind of thing. In that same way, Bhagavan Shri Krishna and Arjuna have that rapport. They do. They regard each other as brothers. So they can speak to each other in these familiar terms. They can wake each other out of this stupor. Pull Arjuna out of that grief. So Shri Krishna here is these are things, remember, in the ancient times, they all belonged to a Gurukul. They learned all these things that Shri Krishna is telling Arjuna. Arjuna, Yudhishthira, all of them studied and they knew all these things that Shri Krishna is telling them. But sometimes we need a little reminder. So Shri Krishna is reminding Arjuna of what he learned. He's telling him that you cannot kill them, boy. You cannot. They will go on to be reborn. They will just leave this body. He said in previous that this body is like the clothes that we wear. You just like how you would enter the body and live in that body, so too you would discard this body and go on to the next body. Just like every day, some people more than once a day, some people once a week, we would discard these clothes and then we will put on new clothes. And Auntie G, every day we bathe and put on new clothes, and yeah. So in the same way, Shri Krishna is saying this. But he's reminding Arjuna because he needs this reminder. Assume this prayerful position as we chant the 26th shloka of Bhagavad Gita. Atha chaina nitya jatam nityam va manyase mritam tatha pitvam mahabaho naivan shochitumarhasi. And Shri Krishna just reiterates his point here. You know, one important technique I've always heard in how you get across a point to someone, you say the same thing, but you say it 5 different ways. Why? Because if they don't understand this way, may understand this way, they may understand this way, or they may understand the next way. Why? Not because you have to repeat yourself, but because sometimes if you say something once, that one thing can be misinterpreted. But if you say that same thing in 5 different ways, there is no room for misinterpretation. There can be, But there's less room. Why? Because you are continuously bringing your ideas to one particular point. So Shri Krishna is doing this here. And he said, but even if you think of him, he's talking about Bhagavan, which is the Atma as well, as constantly being born and constantly dying, then you still should not grieve. You still should not grieve. So this reminds me of a story I heard once. So this grandson and his grandfather, obviously, are there walking. The grandfather is really old. So he tells the grandson to go in that village, leave me here. He tells the grandson to leave me here and go into that village. Go into that village and spend the night. When you come back, you could bury me, because I'm going to die tonight. You could imagine if you were to tell your grandchild that, how they would feel. So the grandson say, Grandpa, how you could say this? Why would you say this? So now the grandfather begins